Thank you, Mary. I am privileged and humbled to be here to address you and to commemorate the 711th anniversary of the great William Wallace being tortured, maimed and butchered to death all those years ago. And I just want to say a few words about what I think his relevance is today. But first of all, it strikes me as one of the great paradoxes of our history that the most iconic figure in Scottish history is probably the one about whom we know the least. Wallace's life is documented by historians only in rare snippets when he comes to the fore. He wasn't, of course, a peasant or a working man. He wasn't one of the lowest in society. The late 13th century in Scotland was a medieval feudal society with a caste system in place which would have prevented that sort of social mobility. But he was neither was he born to be king. He was not at the top of the pecking order. His family were one of the lower reaches of the Scottish nobility. So it is quite remarkable that by the age of 25 or 26, this man has come to ascend to be in charge of Scotland, to be in charge of the nobility and to be the commander of the Scottish armies. He must have been a remarkable character to have achieved that in those times at such an early age. And we know, of course, that Wallace was a formidable warrior and military strategist. The very famous Battle of Stirling Bridge, where he scored a tremendous victory over the English armies despite being outnumbered and outarmed, was testament to his skills as a military person. But he also, of course, was a politician and a diplomat as well. After Stirling Bridge, and indeed after the defeat in Falkirk, he went to the European continent. He went to the courts of Europe and other nations to try and build support for Scotland, to try and build support for the right of Scotland to be free and to determine its own future. And that, to me, is the most important thing about William Wallace. It is not the man, but it is the idea. He personifies more than any person in our history the idea that we will not sit down and be told what to do by other people, that we have a right as the people who live in this country to control and to determine our own destiny. And that is why the cause of national autonomy, the cause of independence, has resonated throughout the last 7 centuries. Support for that idea has ebbed and flowed, but I believe it is never stronger than it is today in the early part of the 21st century. So as we look back over 700 years and remember Wallace, we should remember that the legacy of that man, the legacy of what we did, very much informs what we do today. But I think Wallace would also have been very much impressed by how our movement has developed in the centuries in between, and in particular, how we have been influenced by a more modern, more contemporary strand of radical Scotland. And I talk now of people like John Maclean, Keir Hardie, Robert Cunningham Graham, the figures of the Labour and Socialist movement in the early 20th century in this country. Because they knew then what we have all come to know now, that getting independence is not an end in itself. It is not just a matter of controlling our country, but it is a matter of changing our country and making it better. And that is why I am so encouraged by the political developments in the last few years, because what has happened is that those two radical traditions of Scotland, the campaign for independence and the campaign for social and economic justice, have now overlapped to an extent probably not seen in 100 years. And we now are capable of building a mass movement which will command majority public opinion in Scotland. And the opposition to that movement is now firmly rooted on the right of Scottish politics in the Conservative Party and what they stand for. So as we go forward to look at the challenges ahead, I think we can be in good heart. And I don't want to talk about new SNP or old SNP, but I think it's fair to say we now have a different SNP than we had a few years ago. We have an SNP now which is a mass political organisation extending to every part of this country. An organisation that was formed and forged in the energy and enthusiasm of the Scottish independence campaign of 2012 to 2014. And when I got elected, along with Angela Crowley and the other 56 members of the Scottish Parliament, we did a remarkable thing. For the first time in our history, we sent to Westminster a majority of people who could stand up for Scotland first and foremost, and whose ambition would not be compromised by their allegiance to the Westminster system and their fact that they were part of it. And that is a remarkable step forward that we did in May 2015. And we have taken other steps since. But we now are in a position, I think, to go forward in the next few years and achieve our country's independence. And we should be clear as we explain to people that we want this in order that we can change our country. We want our country to be more compassionate, to look after our old folk, to look after those who cannot look after themselves. We want our country to be fairer and more equal, where everyone is respected and everyone has a chance to achieve their maximum potential. And most of all, we want a country that will not separate itself, as the current union makes Scotland separate from the rest of the world, but will engage with the other people of these islands, of this continent and of the world, and play a role as a modern, independent country in achieving a better world for all of us and for all of those who come after us. So in this, the 711th year of William Wallace's death, we can be quite sure what he fought for is not over, and in the next few years we will go forward to achieve what he believed in. Thank you.